My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's lives reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foot in we're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway, my mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. Lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. I don't think as the idea that the political coverage. I want to thank and recognize Dr. John Kingerson. Good song. I can't get this food at all. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. Lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair, everybody going to my mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. I'm going to lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's lives reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foot in we're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway, my mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. Lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. I don't think as the idea that the political coverage. I want to thank and recognize Dr. John Kingerson. Good song. I can't get this food at all. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. Lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. Mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. Everybody going to my mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. I'm going to lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm in prison. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him in the brigade Caesar, the ill-begotten gaze of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. NATO's...
Almost forgot to unmute the mic. All right. Thank you guys for joining. You know, we got a few watchers right now. It's been a couple weeks since I was able to join you. I went on a little vacation to Las Vegas, so that was fun. But we got an exciting show tonight. We're going to talk to Cait Corrigan. She is a former Republican congressional candidate from New York, and she reached out to me after she saw my article about the FTX scandal. And she has a very unique perspective because she actually ran against Michelle Bond, who was the girlfriend of Ryan David Salami, who is the FTX executive who donated money to Republicans. So we'll let her do some of the talking, but a lot of people assume that all they talk about is Sam Bankman when they talk about the FTX scandal, but that is only part of the story. So when people are saying, oh, Republicans didn't get any money, it's because the money for Republicans came from other executives. So it's going to be interesting. She's going to give you some insight. She's also going to talk to you a little bit about how the GOP establishment works. She's got a fascinating story. So before we get into that, I did want to talk a little bit about what happened today with the Republican Party, because it's going to be my message about, it goes with basically everything with, Republicans are blaming Trump, obviously. The establishment, the narrative's been set. I'm going to have an article that I'm going to post tomorrow. I did a big story about how this effort to scapegoat former President Trump, it was all by design, and they are deploying it in full force. But then they are back in Washington. They haven't even assumed power yet, and they have already surrendered one of their best bargaining chips, because they are still a minority. They have control of the House, but it is important to note that they are still a minority. They could pass all the bills they want in the House, but they're likely going to die in the Senate, especially now. It's not even 50-50 anymore, and it's going to be vetoed by Joe Biden. But your best bargaining chip is the power of the purse, right? Congress controls the allocation of money. And if you don't like the direction the country's going, the decisions the president's making, you can basically shut down the government, refuse to fund the government. Well, you could have, except today, Republicans reach a deal in the Senate to fund the government for the next 10 months, surrendering the option to use that as leverage to stop things they could have stopped. They could say, hey, we don't think there should be a special counsel investigating President Trump. We're not going to fund the government until you end the special counsel, or until Merrick Garland testifies in front of Congress, or maybe until Merrick Garland stops prosecuting and going after conservatives across the country. Or, hey, we're not going to fund the government till we get to the bottom of Hunter Biden's situation. They just gave all of that up. Or we're not going to fund the government till you give us money for the border wall. But then again, why would they have done that, since they had the border wall? They had they had the House and the Senate during the Trump presidency, and they didn't even fund the border wall. So they gave that up today, and they wonder why people are upset, why people didn't show up to vote Republican. It's not because of Trump. It's because the American people don't trust the Republican Party to stick to their guns and to get things done. And they're tired of it. And the GOP is basically signing its own death certificate with their behavior. The country's demographics are changing. It is clear they have no interest in sticking to Trump's movement, to populism, to becoming a party of the working class. It doesn't seem to interest the decision makers at the GOP. But by trying to snuff out and kill that movement, they are killing their own party. And so let's listen to what McConnell had to say today in his infinite wisdom about the omnibus bill.
So admittedly, I'm pretty proud of the fact that with a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate, we were able to achieve through this omnibus spending bill essentially all of our priorities.
So that's what Mitch had to say today about one of the most horrible bills. I mean, because they attach all these earmarks to the omnibus earmarks to the omnibus spending bill. Let's look at some of the things Mitch McConnell claims they're happy that they're proud of. Okay, well, let's look at it. So in the omnibus bill, they actually barred CPB money, Border Patrol money, from being used to improve border security. So any of the money that goes to the Border Patrol cannot be used to improve border security. So when Republicans ran on securing the border in the midterms, because they did run on that, they did talk about that. It was in Kevin McCarthy's commitment to America. Was he lying? Were they lying? Because why would you agree to something like this? Mitch just said they got everything they wanted. So apparently that's something they wanted. What they also apparently wanted, we can't secure our own borders, but in the same bill, they allotted $410 million to help secure the borders of Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Oman. So we can secure foreign nations' borders, but they have no interest in securing the U.S. border. Once again, these are the people that we elected to fight for us. And they wonder why people didn't show up for the GOP. And it gets even worse. Let's look, because it gets worse. There's money, $575 million in this bill for family planning and reproductive health in areas where population growth threatens biodiversity or endangered species. So basically, they want to spend $575 million to stop people from having babies in areas where it's going to affect the climate or endangered species. We already have a declining population. You know, people are not having babies reproducing in the United States at the rate they were. And here we are, we're going to stop population because it's going to hurt biodiversity. So that was in the bill. So Mitch McConnell says they like that. They also, if you weren't sick enough by the fact that Vladimir Zelensky is going to be in Congress tomorrow night giving an address to both houses of Congress, there's money in this bill to name the Ukrainian Independence Park, to establish and name Ukrainian Independence Park in Washington, D.C. So we were led to believe that if we elected the Republicans and gave them power, the gravy train to Ukraine would stop. They show no indication that they're going to do that. Kevin McCarthy tweeted out a couple months ago that he was going to stop sending money to Ukraine. It took him about 12 hours to backtrack and say, I'm not going to stop money altogether. What I'm going to do, though, is make sure we know where it's going. Well, now we get a park. And then I think the worst part about this bill, to me, is the fact that it increases funding for the FBI and the ATF. Given what we just learned about the behavior of the FBI in the last 2 years, who knows how long, because it hasn't just been going on for 2 years. During the whole Trump presidency, he was under. It's apparent now that President Trump was under siege the entire time by his own people in his own administration were going after him. The deep state was going after him. The FBI was going after him. Came out today that Paul Ryan knew that the FBI was spying on Devin Nunes and his committee's work when they were trying to investigate the Trump-Russia hoax. And he did nothing. And today, Republicans helped the Democrats vote to give more funding to an out-of-control, unaccountable agency like the FBI. That's unacceptable. We should be reducing the FBI's size and scope, not making it bigger. So once again, is this Donald Trump's fault? Is this going to make you be excited to vote Republican? So their scapegoating of Donald Trump is ludicrous. They are the reason people didn't show up to vote Republican. They did not give voters an adequate choice. Their entire platform was a carbon copy of 1994 Contract with America and the argument that you should vote Republican because there's a senile old man in the White House who stinks. They didn't present any specific policy, how they were going to make people's lives better. They talked about reducing inflation. They didn't tell you how they were going to do it. It's clear they're not going to stop spending money. That's one of the best ways to stop inflation. They don't plan on doing that. So it's just a disaster. They have nobody to blame but themselves. And in many ways, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell and Ronna McDaniel got exactly what they wanted. They did not want a large majority in the House or the Senate because they knew that large majorities were tough to control. And if they got a large majority, that means a lot of America First, MAGA Republicans loyal to Trump and his movement were going to challenge their positions at the top. And Kevin got what he wanted. He got a small majority, but it turns out he's still in trouble. So before we get to Cait, let's talk a little bit about that because she's going to give us some insight on McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy's on the ropes. So Kevin McCarthy him and Mitch came up with this genius plan that they were going to weed out and destroy Trump loyal MAGA Republicans, America First Republicans. And then they were going to be able to have this nice little small majority composed of rhinos that wouldn't challenge them and that wouldn't rock the boat and that wouldn't push the envelope like people like Madison Cawthorn did. Why do you think they destroyed Madison Cawthorn? They actually used stolen FTX money to do it. They didn't want those kind of people. So Kevin got what he wanted. He got his small majority, but guess what? He still can't get the votes for speaker. And listen, people love to come at me and say, well, Donald Trump says Kevin. I don't care who endorses Kevin McCarthy. If my mom called me up right now on the phone and told me to support Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House, I would say, Mom, I love you, but I can't do that because I know who Kevin McCarthy is. Kevin McCarthy is a used salesman at best. And in my opinion, he's worse than Mitch McConnell because Mitch McConnell's given up the facade. He's in your face, anti-Trump, total swamp rat mode. Kevin McCarthy, on the other hand, disguises his treachery. He'll say and do whatever he needs to do to get the gavel, and then he will stab the American people in the back. He will not deliver on any promises. When he talks about accountability, what he's saying to you is we'll have some public hearings, and that's all that's going to happen. No one's going to go to jail. No one's going to lose their job, but we will send you 1 million fundraising emails with our sound bites in it. So, no, I don't care if that President Trump is backing Kevin McCarthy. I don't care who does. I know what Kevin McCarthy is. We cannot afford to give him that gavel. If Kevin McCarthy is leader in the House of Representatives, he is going to do more damage to the Republican Party going into 2024 than anybody else. And this idea that there's nobody else, right? We have to vote for Kevin because nobody can get the votes is a psyop from Team McCarthy. And they want you to believe that there's only 5 holdouts. Well, the real reports say there's about 30 to 50 Republican no votes still on Kevin McCarthy. So even after President Trump backed Kevin McCarthy, there are brave men and women in the House of Representatives that are saying, no, we cannot let this guy lead our party. And I'm with them. So I told you we were going to have a guest tonight, our first guest ever. Her name is Cait Corrigan. And, a few weeks ago, I don't even know what motivated me at this point. I'm trying to remember now because it was about almost a month ago now that I saw a post about the FTX scandal. I think it was because there was money given to some Republicans by Sam Bankman. He gave to impeachment Republicans. And then I was like, you know what? I got to look into this more. And I went on the FEC website, which I think everybody should know that you can do this. You can go on the FEC's website and you can see every donation that's made in politics. And so I started looking into it and I said, wait a minute. It wasn't just Democrats who got money. Why did all these Republicans get money? And then I looked at who the Republicans were and what the money was used for. And then I saw that Kevin McCarthy got a lot of money and I got really interested. And I said, this is a major story. And I made a list. I posted it first. It was just all the Republican names. It took off way quicker than I thought. And then everybody was coming at me saying, well, why don't you post the Democrats too? And I was like, listen, give me some time. I'm working at my store. I run a business. They're like, why haven't you posted it? Why haven't you posted it? Anyway, I went to town. I made a huge spreadsheet with everybody who got money, all the committees they served on. And it's kind of taken off. And then Cait messaged me and said, hey, I saw your work. And I ran against one of the Republicans in New York who got the money. And I remember when I first started doing the work, I saw this name, Michelle Bond, and I saw that she got a large amount of money, more than most Republicans at least individually to their campaign. She got more than most from FTX. And I was like, whoa, this is weird, because most of the money that FTX gave to Republicans went to incumbents. There was only about 3 challengers that got the money. And those were ones, I believe 2 of them were ones that had beat Trump impeachers and were in Republican districts, so they were likely to win. So they got money. And it was to Republicans who were on the most powerful committees: Appropriations, Ways and Means, the Judicial Committee, the Budgetary Committees. But then I saw this lady, Michelle Bond, and I was like, well, what made this woman so special? Why did they like her so much? And then Cait contacted me and said, hey, I ran against her. And she told me an interesting little story. So let's bring Cait on. Cait, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, let me just make sure it's working on here. I think it's working good. So first off, you can introduce yourself a little. Tell us a little bit about your story. So you ran for Congress in New York. Let's start with what district was it? Tell a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I ran in New York's first congressional district, which is on Long Island. It was previously held by Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, who ran to be our next governor in New York. Unfortunately, he lost, and we are stuck with dictator Kathy Hochul. But it is a Republican district. It is a Republican district, and so I ran against Michelle Bond. Unfortunately, I was illegally removed from the ballot after being placed and nominated to run in New York's first congressional district. I was removed by the Suffolk County Board of Elections for the reason being that they did not know which party I was running in, which was absolutely ludicrous and insane. My other opponent, named Nick LaLota, he is now our congressman-elect, but he worked at the Suffolk County Board of Elections for 8 years prior to running and announcing his run for Congress. But
so he worked. So you had a. Sorry to cut you off there. You had I just thought again a little bit about how Arizona, Katie Hobbs was the Secretary of State, basically ran her own election. Then we had the machine malfunctioning, and she's saying, oh, it was all, innocent behavior. But you actually ran this as a Republican.
Right.
Yeah, you're still talking. For some reason, your video disappeared. But anyway, we can still do the talk.
But
you, there you go. You ran against a Republican who worked on the Board of Elections. So was he the leading factor in getting you off the ticket? Obviously, you had, it was friendly fire, because I can relate to that, correct?
Oh, yes, 100%. He was certainly involved in that decision making, whether it was mostly of his colleagues doing that on his behalf due to loyalty, obviously, or whether that was, mostly him leading the influence. Regardless, he wasn't involved in that.
So before we talk about the FTX thing, because that's the major thing we're going to talk about a little bit with you and Michelle Bond, I did want, we talked before you came on, and I was interested. I'd like you to tell, because you're 25 years old, you were in college. I'm 34 now. I always forget. But you're only 25 years old, and I was like, you decided to step up. Tell people why you decided, because you reminded me of something, one of the big reasons why I decided to step up. So I want you to tell people why you decided to step up, and then I'll give a little parallel of one of the deciding factors for me. So.
Definitely. Well, the reason why I decided to run for office is because we are living in such a pivotal time in our nation's history. And I have been at the forefront of the medical freedom movement. I overturned my former college's COVID-19 vaccine policy in April of 2021. And then I went on to pursue a second master's program at Boston University School of Theology, where I received a 3-year full tuition scholarship. But I was suspended for what they call is COVID noncompliance, but I was banned from the school the day after I was featured in a Boston Globe article, which stated that I had helped over 10,000 Americans file successful religious exemptions. And the article also explained how I spoke at an anti-mandate rally at the Massachusetts State House.
So you helped over 10,000 people file religious exemptions for the vaccine mandate. That's impressive. We need more people like you, because what happened to people was ridiculous. But your story actually, I don't know why I didn't say it when we were talking beforehand, but it made me remember. I don't know how I could have forgotten one of the reasons why I did decide to run too, besides the fact that I was upset about everything that was going on after the 2020 election. I, my uncle, I told you before that I was previously born in Connecticut. I lived in Connecticut my whole life, except till I moved out here, and except when I went to college in Scranton, Pennsylvania. But most of my family is still back in Connecticut. I was lucky enough to grow up next door to my cousins, my aunt and uncle. They lived next door. So I had like two sets of parents basically. And I got a phone call. It's probably, I think it was April, pretty sure it was April of 2020 from my dad. Well, my dad called me. I was doing something, didn't answer. And then my sister called me. And if anybody knows me and my relationship with my sister, basically my sister's only calling me when there's something going on, because we fight like cats and dogs our whole lives. And I'm like, oh, well, if Lauren's calling me, then something's going on. And I answered the phone, and they told me that my uncle had died. He was retired, and he used to mow old people's lawns for free. He would take his lawnmower out, he'd drive to the house, he'd mow their lawn. And he had some sort of cardiac event while he was doing it. They found him basically dead in somebody's front yard. And we were told we couldn't have a funeral. I flew in. This is the kind of guy, like I said, he would have given the shirt off his back to anybody. Everybody loved him. I flew back home. They would only let 6 of us in the funeral home for the wake. We couldn't even have a real service even outside. They only let 5 of us at the cemetery. The priest showed up for like 5 minutes and was quick to get out of there. And I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Because at the same time, I remember turning on the television. This was during the height of riot season. And I see, tens of thousands of people in the streets burning down cities, breaking into businesses. And we're being told that, oh, that's okay because that they're expressing themselves for social justice. And I'm saying, well, they're allowed to do that. And we can't have, 30 people in a church to have a funeral. And I said, this is ridiculous. And nobody should have to do this. And I was sitting there and I'm like, why is no one speaking up for us? Because there was very few, if any, elected Republicans that really spoke up and pushed back at the time. So I did want to share that because I was like, man, I should have told her that. So that forced me to step up because, like you said, we're at a pivotal point in this country's history. Our rights are being violated, and you and I, you have an interesting perspective because you were actually a Democrat, right?
Yeah, I was a registered Democrat. And, I think that we have seen such a major shift in our country, right? All of our constitutional rights have been violated when it comes to censorship, when it comes to conservatives just being fired or suspended from school because of their political or even their religious beliefs, or even their beliefs on these vaccine mandates, right? It comes down to such simple reasons as to why people are being canceled. We have children that are still in mass in different states across the country, which is child abuse. And like you said, there were so many Republicans that were silent when we needed them. We needed them to stand up and represent us. We needed them to represent all of I'm not sure if you had a similar scandal in California, but in New York and in New Jersey and in other Democrat states on the East Coast, our senior citizens were murdered in nursing homes, and nobody was speaking up for them. And it's absolutely insane what we have allowed to happen in our country. And that's why I ran for office. I was so sick and tired of what's happening in our college campuses with the indoctrination and cancel culture. And I couldn't take it anymore. That's why I was suspended. And I said, enough is enough. And we need people, even young people, to help stand up and save this country.
No, and like you said previously, I don't think any conservative listening or out there would disagree with everything you just said, why we needed people to stand up. And then you had the unfortunate instance, like I did, you did step up, and it wasn't the Democrats who really were your most resistance. You were taken out by your own party. And that has to have you frustrated, like it has me frustrated, because I know one thing that I experienced, I was running for about 2 years. I spent 2 years of my life, I neglected my business for 2 years. I'm still making up for that. because I really believed in this and I wanted to help people. And then to have your own party, who I would go to these GOP events and they would stand up there and say, we need good people to run. We need people to answer to the call. And then I found out, well, they don't really mean it, because when good people step up, we played ball. I played ball with them. I tried to do everything they asked of me, and it didn't matter. If you're not part of the clique, they weren't interested in that. So you stepped up for the right reasons, and you didn't even face the most adversity from Democrats. You faced it from Republicans.
This is 100% true. And the thing is that what Republicans and what the establishment does not understand, and what's such a pressing issue right now, is that in 2024, our next election season, millennials and Gen Z will be the largest voting demographic. And what Republicans love to do is they love to bash Gen Z. They love to bash my generation for all of the problems that we have in the world, which is quite alarming to really understand and wrap your brain around. And the thing is that you have young candidates. I mean, even like yourself, we have people in politics who have been in office for 40 years. We have young people in their 20s and 30s running, and what do? Conservatives and the GOP establishment, they turn their focus away from culture. They try to derail young people that are trying to get involved in politics to help save our country. They laugh in our faces. They've laughed in my face. And then they want to say that they want to just insult Gen Z. Well, what is the plan and what is the strategy for 2024? I'd like to know.
No,
because
and that's
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that is a great point that you brought up, because I'm not 25. I'm 34. Wish I was still 25. But I'm 34, which is relatively young to be getting into politics nowadays. I mean, in California, we have a senator who's 90 years old, and she's going to run for re-election again. So Dianne Feinstein. So my campaign staff for 2 years basically was me, my 19-year-old at the time campaign manager, who was great, and my 23-year-old staffer. And then I had obviously my consultant, who was, everybody knows, Rich Barris and I were buddies. Rich is, we're always talking. So we were never even supposed to get, they had tried to, every donor here, all the media here was told not to write any stories about me, not to take my phone calls. And they assumed that I would never make it to even the primary election this year. And then we just kept going, and I found ways to raise money, and they were not happy about that, which is why Kevin ended up throwing in his donor candidate to replace me. But they don't, we do need younger voices. And I was a teacher in the classroom, so I kind of understand a little bit about Gen Z and this kind of thing. And we need Republicans who are going to speak to them, because I know what's being taught to them in schools and what's being told to them. And we need to show them that it is okay to be a young person and to be conservative. And we need to make sure that they're hearing the conservative side of the story. And unfortunately, one of the things I felt the Republican Party failed at during the midterm elections, the Republicans cut and run from the culture wars. They're scared to talk about things like abortion. They're scared to talk about those types of issues. They'd rather run and let the Democrats control the narrative. And this hurts us with younger voters. So yes, we do need younger voters. I mean, the GOP electorate is it's older. I mean, the traditional GOP voters, 65 plus, we need younger generation of voters. And that's why I felt so strongly about Trumpism and his platform. And a lot of people, I know, go crazy when you talk about Trumpism, right? There's this difficulty. Listen, I like President Trump. I mean, I don't think anybody will ever question me on my loyalty to President Trump. But his platform is what I love, because I recognize there's a difference between the man and the platform. And the platform he came up with is how the GOP can win with younger voters and how the GOP can win with non-traditional Republicans. And here you have an establishment that just does not want to change. They want their old party back, and they can't even see, or they don't want to see, or they just don't care that they're killing the party and they're hurting America, because like you said, our rights are under attack. You spoke up, and it wasn't the Democrats who took you out. It was your own party that had no interest in helping you. So, tell me a little bit about what you experienced. Now, you first contacted me about the FTX thing. So you ran against Michelle Bond. She got about, I believe it was like, what was it, 11? Let me look, because I had the thing up. trying to see the total she got because she received some of the most money. So
she did, and it was interesting because a lot of money was funneled from FTX to different PACs.
Yeah, so she got $28,000 from FTX executives, which is actually more than any Republican.
Yes.
And why is that? Explain who is Michelle Bond?
Well, Michelle Bond is the girlfriend of Ryan Salame, and Ryan Salame is the co-CEO of FTX. And so I think it's so important that we not only talk about SBF, but we also talk about Ryan Salame. And Ryan Salame is 28 years old, and he pushes this agenda of cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency, I want to just start off by saying, is that it's been this topic that I've always been skeptical of. This concept of cryptocurrency, putting our money online. And I've been speaking out against this for a long time, even before I ran for office. I, told my followers that I wasn't, a big supporter of cryptocurrency and putting my money and investing in that. And I think what's important, especially for even people in my district of farmers and hardworking Americans, is that we want, and small business owners, we want to ensure that we have the dollar. We have physical money that we can utilize to exchange with different goods and services, and we cannot move away from that sort of system, because when we move away from that to something that is digital, we're moving into more of this whole sort of society that's being supported and pushed by the World Economic Forum. Right. And this is something I'm completely against. Right. I'm completely against any sort of digital passport, vaccine passport, all of that. And if you are supportive of this whole push for cryptocurrency, less regulations on cryptocurrency, supporting the World Economic Forum, which FTX does support, which is clear, that we've seen right through all of the information being spread about the CEO of FTX, that we're moving into this society that is completely dystopian from what we have right now. So
yeah, and you mentioned it's not just about FBF. So this is the thing, people have gotten confused, and I've experienced this even when I originally posted my article. And when because I've been making tweets almost every day about why haven't Republicans acknowledged or given the money back. And there are a lot of conservatives that come and attack me and say, oh, you're spreading fake news. Democrats got 8 times more money. It's really not true. Democrats got, all the media is focused on right now is SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried. He gave about $40 million. Vast majority of it is true, went to Democrats. He only gave to a few Republicans and a couple PACs, and they were impeachment Republicans in the Senate. And Tom Tillis's PAC in North Carolina, which that money was used to take out Madison Cawthorn. So that's a terrible part of this story. But a lot of people don't realize, because it hasn't gotten a lot of attention, that there's far more to the story than just Sam Bankman-Fried. This guy, Ryan David Salame, donated about $20 million to Republicans. So he was the one who was giving the money to Republicans. And you went up, were in a race where his girlfriend ran as a Republican, and she got a lot of money. So people have to understand, they're saying my article on my website did focus a lot on the story that the money told in regards to Republicans, because to me, the story is a lot more interesting about Republicans, because we ran as Republicans because we're trying to save this country. And a lot of people are counting on the Republican Party to be the resistance to the Democrats' quote unquote corruption. But when you peel the onion back, it sure looks like the GOP establishment is just as bad as the Democrat establishment. They're not just as bad. They are just as bad. And a lot of people, that is the big part of this story. There are a lot of guilty parties, and it really, people, I'm sure you know the term uniparty. I think that this story with FTX shows more than most things how real the uniparty really is.
Well, even, as far as people who want to say, oh, well, why are you calling out, Republicans? Why are you talking about Democrats? The thing is the question people should be asking is, why is FTX so involved and invested in our elections? right? Why are they involved? And what was the gain? What was their gain to be supporting political candidates on both sides of the aisle, right? And it's clear that FTX was funding both parties for personal gain, at the very least, in an attempt to avoid crypto regulations and to push globalist agendas. And so they chose candidates that must have been in support of these globalist agendas or would have just followed through with different crypto regulations. And for America First candidates who were either leery of globalist agendas, were really pushing their policies to be against, globalism, against the World Economic Forum, and against cryptocurrency, then they knew, oh, we're going to completely avoid those candidates and support their opponents.
Yeah, and I think the key is, so if Kevin McCarthy was getting $2.5 million from these people, it's hard to believe. I mean, oh, did you hear me? Oh, I think my...
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. Kevin McCarthy is getting 2.5 million from these people. It was a little more because he got some to his other PACs. And then he goes out there and pretends to be America First and this whole Trumper. But and I know that the FTX money wasn't given to Kevin McCarthy because he was truly an America First anti-globalist guy. I mean, Kevin McCarthy's a World Economic Forum guy. And you hit the nail on the head. The money that was given to Republicans was given for a reason. And once again, when I first made this post, there were a lot of people that were immediately saying, well, maybe they didn't know where the money came from. Listen, you ran for office. I ran for office. Politicians know, especially when you're getting max donations, who's giving you the money. They know who it is, and especially incumbents. These incumbents have staffers that is their job, to know who's giving the money and basically what it's being given for. These Republicans knew what the money was for, and it was done, like you said, to
right. Well,
stop.
even when I talked to donors would tell me what their interests were and what their policies were, and I was very upfront about, well, there were some people I talked to where they had said, well, I'm very much in support of big pharma and support of vaccine mandates, and I said, well, then I'm not your candidate. And I said from the very beginning publicly that I will not take any money from big pharma, and you can check on Open Secrets to see who gave me donations, and you will not see any sort of person who works for big pharma or any sort of pharmaceutical company donating money to my campaign, because our values do not align. And unfortunately, we don't see the same with maybe politicians who claim that they were America First. And one thing that's important here is that the money that FTX used was laundered from Ukraine, right? And so this is a part of the story that has not been shared much on mainstream media. And now that the jig is up in regards to this Ukraine FTX money laundering scandal, where American taxpaying dollars were sent to Ukraine, thinking that it was for the war in Ukraine, right, to fight against Russia, was then used and funneled back into our electoral system, into our elections, to fund different candidates that want to support globalism in our country. Completely insane. And now we have to ask ourselves, has the Biden administration found a new way to launder money? I don't know if you've seen recently, but Joe Biden plans to provide over $165 million to support fair elections in African countries in 2023. So
no, and I did in the omnibus bill, there's 47 more million for Ukraine. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, this idea, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I've been disappointed with, I'll be upfront. I'm disappointed in the fact that she is out there shilling for Kevin McCarthy after Kevin McCarthy used some of this stolen FTX money to take out her friends. Madison Cawthorn is somebody she calls a friend. And Tom Tillis in North Carolina and Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell teamed up to take out Madison Cawthorn because he's, quote unquote, a troublemaker. They didn't want that. And so for her to shill for him is disappointing. And so this money, it's nefarious purposes. And somebody just commented, Democrats usually like to get elected so they can... Yeah, I mean, a lot of this money that went to the GOP, I think there was a realization among people at FTX. They knew they were under investigation by the SEC. And that's another part of the story that really hasn't gotten as much coverage. There were 5 members of Congress who accepted money from FTX and actually wrote a letter to the SEC demanding to close the investigation. And so I think people don't understand that these people knew they were under investigation. The money went to Republicans on the most powerful committees, appropriations, ways and means, went to the same Democrats on those committees. But one of the reasons why I hammered Republicans so much is because I know what the Democrats are. I mean, I think you know what you used to be a Democrat. There's a reason you left the Democratic Party. I know what they are. I expect more out of the Republican Party. And I am heavily critical of the Republican Party and Republican leadership because if they aren't there to defend us in Washington against the corruption, against everything that's going on, we are defenseless. And unfortunately, they are proving with their behavior after the election that we are defenseless right now, that they don't offer a viable alternative, and that we really need to, as voters, investigate who we're really voting for. I know a lot of people have a lot going on. There's a lot of money in politics, and you experience, they didn't even let you get to the ballot. That's the thing that's so frustrating. They didn't even let you face the voters. You got the signatures you needed.
And that's because I have so much name recognition here on Long Island. I organized the first rally in New York State against the vaccine mandates for college students. As we know, the mandates came for college students first. I have a huge following on social media, and my base is Long Island. This has been my home for years, and it's upsetting what happened, but that's because I was a threat, and that's why they came after you as well.
People should think about that. This is the Republican Party that didn't want somebody who was speaking up against vaccines. So the Republican Party, who we wanted to fight for us against vaccine mandates, lockdowns, and all this stuff, they went after you because they didn't want that.
Right.
And that, I think, people, would shock a lot of people, because publicly a lot of these Republicans talk a big game. But I do hope people remember there was very few, if you spoke up, but you weren't an elected leader at the time. The people that were speaking up on the conservative side, for the most part, were not elected officials. Our elected leaders let us down.
They still do. I mean, we've got Republicans like Mitt Romney who voted against trying to reinstate our military service members who were, fired from the military over declining this vaccine. I mean, and it's so upsetting because people like me who, were once a former Democrat, right? We walked away from the Democratic Party and we left that party not to join a party of weak, spineless, swamp-like creatures. We didn't. We left the party to help save our country and to wake up to the insanity of the left. And now we have Republicans that do the exact same thing. They just call themselves Republican and make themselves feel better when they're the same.
I think that is one of the things that pushed Trump over the top, despite all of the odds and people saying he had no chance in 2016. For the first time, voters saw a Republican who was going to give it back to the left as hard as they dished it out. And this had never happened before, maybe besides Ronald Reagan, who was willing to stand up to the left. Trump had no interest in tucking his tail between his legs. Unfortunately, one of Trump's biggest hindrances was the fact that many of the people he thought were on his team because he won were conspiring behind his back and undermining him at every turn. So, this story and your story is so fascinating, and I can't thank you enough for stepping up. And we need people like you. And before I let you go, you did mention something about, I wanted to make the comment when you said it, but Adam Kinzinger, I'm sure you know him. He actually, the craziest thing is he's a guy who ran for Congress as a Tea Party Republican. So Adam Kinzinger was elected as a Tea Party Republican, and we all see him now. I mean, he's got the Ukraine flag in his bio, and he's just about he's a Democrat at this point. But he made a comment blaming young candidates for, I'm sure you saw it, right? Did you see it? He actually said Republicans lost because we nominated 20-something-year-old candidates. What do you have to say for that?
This is such a lie. I mean, this just goes into how so many rhinos are trying to blame Trump for the fact that we lost. And honestly, we should really blame the RNC chairwoman for the reason why money was not spent the way it should have been allocated, right? We spent, millions of dollars in donations and flower bouquets and on all of these different gifts. I don't know if you've seen that information of I mean, this is completely insane, and we see why so many seats that could have been that were winnable for Republicans, right? We see in swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, and candidates lost. Why? Because of various reasons. One, we still have not addressed the issue of ballot harvesting. Two, you want to continuously blame soon to be the largest voting demographic in the country, millennials and Gen Z. Well, you better wake up sooner than later, because you're going to keep losing elections if you don't start bringing in younger voters. And who's going to bring in younger voters? Sorry, not 80-year-old people. That's not going to bring in the younger voters. It's not.
No,
We need a new face.
And actually, Trumpism, which is populism. So it's populism is going to help bring in these younger voters, because it's talking about, there are parts of populism that traditional conservatism does not cover, wage gains, bringing American jobs back, making, housing more affordable. I mean, these are things that younger voters care about. I mean, most young people can't afford to buy a house right now. There was just an article in the Atlantic today telling people that we should not want to own houses anymore, because that is, after all, their end game. That's why they don't care that things become so expensive. But to engage those younger voters, traditional conservatism, old school, 1980s Republicanism, it had its day, but it's not going to win the future. And we do need young people to start realizing that, hey, I don't have to vote Democrat, because I know, even when I taught New Haven, Connecticut, very liberal school district, very liberal area in Connecticut. But even the kids realize that a lot of things the Democrats say and do is crazy. But as Republicans, we very rarely go out and engage these voter groups. Oh, young people aren't going to vote for us. We don't have to go there. And this is one of the things I try to do in my campaign, because I'm in a Latino area. And traditionally, Republicans have not gone to these areas. They've been afraid to go into inner cities. They're afraid to go talk to young people. They're afraid to go into minority communities and sell their vision. They have no interest in that. But one of the things Trump did that made him so special is he did that in 2016. He went to Michigan. He went to Wisconsin. He went to places. He went to Philadelphia, places where Republicans didn't go. And people said, well, wait a minute, here's another side. One of the things I got that'll always stay with me was the feeling when I knocked on these doors and people said, I can't believe you're here. I'm surprised you're here. And it wasn't just that I was a Republican, or it was just anyone, that a candidate showed up at their door themselves and talked to them. And so, it breaks my heart that I couldn't win for them and go to Washington and fight for them, because like I said, I had no interest. I wasn't going to DC for the Republican Party. I was going to Washington for the people of the Central Valley and for the American people. And I think you were doing the same. And it's unfortunate that our side doesn't like that about candidates. They want people who are going to go to Washington, D.C. and not step on toes and not break the status quo. Because unfortunately, the status quo makes them a lot of money, whether it's through donations from cryptocurrency executives or big pharma buying them off. And, you're 25 years old, but you had a full ride. You organized rallies. You've done more than a lot of these Republicans that have been elected to Congress for 40 years. So, and not just Republicans, Democrats. So being age to me does not determine one's qualifications.
It doesn't, David. And the thing is when you look at our nation's history and you study it, it is the young people who helped fight to create the America we have now. When you see all of the American freedom fighter patriots back in the 1700s, people who gave their lives to fight for our country in the American Revolutionary War, they were teenagers. They were young 20-year-olds. And when you see even the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, many of them were in their 20s.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we need to branch out to these groups, minority voters, younger voters. And it's just frustrating because you and I understand that the GOP right now they might have won this time. I don't consider this a victory, and I'm going to be publishing an article tomorrow that discusses in detail what happened, because they're pointing to 6 races. And basically I labeled about 6 races that everybody talks about in the House, Senate, and in the governorships as to why Trump lost the election, why it was his candidates. But I don't know if people understand that that even if the Republican Party had won those 6 races in the House, that would have given them 228 seats. Well, in the days leading up to the election, people were talking, even liberal pundits were saying the GOP was going to pick up about 40 to 50 seats. Well, actually, McCarthy and McConnell's people lost more seats than Trump's people. Where did those other 20 to 40 seats go that were handpicked Republican candidates? It wasn't Trump who lost them. Trump was not on the ballot. And actually in 2020, with Trump on the ballot, Republicans were able to win almost every single competitive seat that Cook Political had rated as a toss-up. Whereas you flip around this side with Trump not on the ballot, we lost almost every competitive seat. And you hit the nail on the head. They beat us on the ground because the GOP, for all intents and purposes, was too busy spending their money, their stolen money, targeting their own candidates. So while the GOP was using,
or Mitch McConnell spending money, Mitch McConnell spending millions of dollars in Alaska. I mean, it's not Trump's fault. It's not young voters or young candidates. It's not their fault. They actually helped our cause to help get more people. I mean, I registered my campaign. We registered dozens and dozens and dozens of voters, and many of them young people.
No, and that's great because that's one of the things we did. We set up at flea markets, which are Latino flea markets here, and we were registering voters, and the NRCC wanted us to give them their emails and stuff. And I was like, at that point, I knew they were going to screw me, and I was like, I'm not giving you anything because I did this work, and here you want to do it and take all these voters. But yeah, so I want to thank you for coming on. You know, if you want to come on in the future, especially when I get more of a following, I'd love to have you on again to discuss it. And,
thanks, David.
I would hope that you can give an update on, because right now, you know, you could say a little, you are trying to get reinstated or get some restitution from the college for suspending you, which I think is ridiculous that you're still suspended, especially with all of these mandates and stuff mostly lifted for them to, it's basically punitive action against you. So I'll pray for you. I know the listeners will, and thank you very much. And let's keep in touch.
Yes. Thank you so much, David. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Have a great night. I know it's late there, so have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that was Cait, and she, you know, she's great, and she hit a lot of things on the head. And before, you know, I go, yeah, Tommy, you're still on here, and that's good. I think Trump should run for speaker. I'm glad you just wrote that because listen, this argument put forth by Kevin McCarthy is bullcrap, and the people pushing it are lying to you. It is not Kevin or bust. There are 221 other Republicans in the House of Representatives. This idea that only Kevin McCarthy can get 218 votes is nonsense. Because first off, it appears that Kevin McCarthy himself can't get 218 votes. So what they're really telling you is that there is no Republican that can get 218 votes. Kevin McCarthy should do the right thing and step aside. I mentioned a man who I admire, a man who went to bat for me, even in the face of the NRCC and Kevin McCarthy trying to tell him not to or to retract his endorsement. Tom McClintock would be an excellent voice for the Republican Party over the next 2 years. Tom is shown he is a true conservative. I mean, if you listen to Tom speak, he has a great way to get his message out. He just tried to fight to get rid of earmarks, and the Republicans turned it down. You cannot convince me that a man like Tom McClintock could not get 218 votes. I cannot see any Republican who would vote against Tom McClintock. I think Thomas Massie could get 218 votes. I think Jim Jordan, if he wasn't being controlled by Kevin McCarthy right now, could get 218 votes. But Trump would be a great idea. I think the former president should stand up and say, listen, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do this because we need a leader right now. We need to show the American people that the Republicans mean business and that we are going to hold the Democrats accountable, that we are going to make heads roll. And I think that Trump would be a great speaker for the Republican Party. So Kevin should do the right thing. There's no coincidence Kevin couldn't get the votes in 2016. He can't get the votes right now. And it's not just 5 people. The 5 most vocal, Matt Gaetz, they're heroes. Okay, the people standing out against Kevin McCarthy are heroes. They understand, like I said at the beginning of the show, that a Kevin McCarthy speakership would do more harm to the Republican Party than good. We are already losing the battle for America's soul because we are not showing the American people we are up to the task that history demands of us. For people want this to stop, but they're not going to vote Republican if they don't trust the Republican Party. How can you have Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, two men whose approval ratings are below 25%? The last thing I saw, McConnell's approval ratings at like 15%. Kevin's is at like 24%. In CA 13, the district I ran in, where the Republican candidate-elect, Congressman-elect, just publicly vowed to vote for McCarthy, Kevin's approval is 23%. So even in his home turf, people do not like Kevin McCarthy. We need leaders up to the task history demands. We need leaders worthy of 1776, because that is where we're at right now. We are a battle for America's soul and for America's future. And we need fighters. And I think the former president has shown he is willing to fight. And I, quite frankly, would love to see Nancy Pelosi have to hand the gavel over to Donald Trump. I mean, could you guys imagine how awesome that scene would be? Nancy Pelosi surrendering the gavel to Donald Trump and having Trump be Speaker of the House. I think that is where we should go. But even more so, like I said, this notion that only Kevin can get 218 votes is ludicrous, because apparently Kevin can't get even 218 votes. So I want to thank you guys for watching tonight. We'll be back next week. I saw the Republicans pass the omnibus bill. They sold us. They're not even in power yet, and they're selling us out. Okay? It's unfortunate. It's predictable. It's why I'm so hard against the GOP, why I spend so much time criticizing Republicans, because I demand more from them. These are the ones, Republicans are the ones who we believe are counting on to save us. And instead they're selling us out. So I want to thank Cait for coming on. I want to thank you guys for joining me. And I will see you all next week.
What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair, everybody at going to my mind's going blank now. What's happening? What I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising and with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's lives reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him in. We're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you would like to be able to. Anyway, my mind's going blank now. What's happening? What I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. I don't think as the idea that the political coverage of I want to thank and recognize Dr. John Kingersong. Good song. I can't get this to function at all. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? What I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. No idea. No idea. No idea. What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair, everybody at going to my mind's going blank now. What's happening? What I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising and with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's why it's reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him in. We're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you would like to be able to. Anyway. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? I can't remember. I'm going to lose track. My mind's going blank now.